Hey everybody, and welcome to World Cinema Breakdown, or in short, WCB, and thank you for joining me. I'm Utkarsh Raheja, and today we'll be looking at episode 1 of All of Us Are Dead. Of course, the Korean show that a lot of people are talking about, and if you don't know what I'm talking about, please go check out my trailer reaction to this show that I did a few days back, because I've been looking forward to watching this for so long. But before we dive into this video, I just wanted to remind everyone that I'm on the road to 250 subscribers, so please help me get there. And if you haven't already subscribed, click that little subscribe button. Thank you so much. But now let's get right into this episode. What a way to start off the show. The first episode is probably almost as important as the final episode of a season or a show, because if the first episode isn't done right, then the viewer has no motivation to go on to the second episode, and things have to be done well enough in the first episode to where the world is set up, you understand characters, and you're interested enough to go on. And I think this first episode did all of the above. It starts off with high intensity, ends with high intensity, and then everything in between is getting to meet lots of new characters, clearly an ensemble cast. But let's start talking about the very beginning, the intro sequence you see, which you've already seen in the beginning of this video. That was so clever how it just transitions into people's hands, zombies' hands. What a creative intro. But in terms of the actual intro of the show, meaning the first few scenes of the show, oh my god, it just starts off super dark and of course ends dark. We see all those bullies bullying Jinsu, and clearly Jinsu can't handle them, and then you see moments where he might possibly be turning into a zombie, and then obviously you find out that he did turn into a zombie. But one thing I want to point out about that particular sequence is the way the cinematography was excellent, the way the shots were done. While some of them were traditional in nature, they were just done in a unique way despite being relatively traditional, because the kind of shots you see in that sequence aren't traditional for a fight scene necessarily, and this is an example of what I mean. And like I said before, while there was nothing particularly wow about the way it was shot, it's just the combination of the scene and the way it was shot together is unique, because you don't normally see this kind of a shot. Because in a fight scene, or in a scene where people are beating somebody up, it'll probably be more so a tracking shot, where the camera's behind the bully or behind whoever's fighting, or maybe in a over the top type of shot. But this was kind of cool because you get to see multiple angles, and as the scene went on, you see all sorts of different kind of angles and cool cinematography. But moving on from that, more characters are introduced few minutes in, and things start off quickly when that student, I forgot her name, but she goes into the science lab, and she's curious about the rat that she sees, and of course, like some stupid idiot, she puts her finger inside the cage, and then the rat bites her, and that sets everything off. This is what I mean. I thought this scene was really cool because of what we saw, the way that the rat was acting and kind of just twitching all over the place, because obviously this foreshadowed the way the humans are gonna be acting and twitching. But another reason this was really cool was the fact that in most zombie shows and movies, we don't necessarily see the spread beginning from an animal, such as especially like a rat. In real life, yes, animals do spread viruses, or might even be the starting point of viruses, COVID-19, but in zombie shows and movies, that's usually not the case. So that was pretty cool. And then as the story progressed, we kind of find out that, the main setting is going to be a school, and the students are kind of just starting off their day, and we see Unjo having breakfast with her father. And while that scene seemed a little dragged out, it seemed like it was necessary. The reason for that is because you kind of have this ominous feel, like she's never going to be able to have breakfast again with her father, which most likely might be the case. There's only one way to find out, by watching this. But there's one thing that her father said that struck a nerve with me. He said something along the lines of, in the time of crisis or a problem, it doesn't matter how rich you are, how poor you are, how smart you are, how dumb you are. At the end of the day, the only thing that matters is if you're healthy. and she kind of neglects him and kind of moves on, says, no, I'll score well in school, blah, blah, blah. But I think that was foreshadowing because obviously this whole zombie outbreak is about to happen, and it doesn't matter how rich you are or poor you are subjected to the same risks and same situations as somebody who's smart or dumb is going to be subjected to. So that was pretty cool.
야, 엊그제 톨게이트 쪽에서 사고 나서 아빠가 출동했는데 돈이 많건 적건 공부를 잘했건 못했건 사고 앞에서는 다 평등하더라. 성적이 중요한 게 아니야. 안전하고 건강한 게 최고야.
And then as the things progress, we get to see a lot more characters. You know, we see Chong-sun and Onjo going to school, and then after that we see the dynamic of the hierarchy, so to say, of the students in the school. And of course we see the bullies, and I think the bullies are written really well because the moment you see them, the only thought you have is that you want to punch these idiots, you know, because of everything that they're doing. But I think that's a sign of good writing. Now I'm curious to see if this was just more to set up the scene or to set up the fact that it's a school and these type of things happen, or are we actually going to see these bullies play a bigger role moving forward? Because oftentimes in these zombie shows or movies, and in real life as well, the crisis itself is obviously challenging, but then it gets worse when humans themselves start fighting with each other or feuding with each other. So I think that's most likely going to be the case. And then, of course, a day passes by, and the next day everyone's curious about where that missing student is. And, you know, she runs into the classroom, or I guess she hobbles her way into the classroom, and, you know, she eventually turns. And you see that scene when they take her to the nurse's office, and she's like all like, oh, she's twitching, right? I think that was important because a lot of things happen in that scene, plus the scene where the nurse starts to turn, that kind of establish the rules of this world, so to speak, or the rules of this virus. Because we find out that like as soon as, not necessarily as soon as, but a few moments after you've been bitten, your body loses temperature drastically and it drops like crazy, you know, 29, 30 degrees Celsius, and you start bleeding from your nose. And then of course that leads to your veins kind of moving around, and then of course the last thing is bone cracks and your body just starts to twitch. And a great example of that was, you know, like I said, when that girl was taken to the nurse's office, and then the nurse herself, as you can see right here. A few moments after this particular scene that we just saw with the nurse, things go from 0 to 100 real quick, because she just flies out the nurse's office and bam, she, you know, whacks herself against the wall, and then boom, she bites one student and just sets everything off. And I thought that was really cool because, you know, in the real world, if something like this were to happen, it's not going to be like, oh, today we have 1 patient, 2 days later we have 4 patients. No, it's going to be like boom. It's going to be like a time bomb that's just waiting to tick. Now, what I want to talk about with respect to the show as a whole is its ensemble cast. I was really impressed with how many characters were introduced, because of the fact that, you know, in all these grand and big shows we've seen in recent memory, like, you know, like for example, Game of Thrones, there's so many characters. That becomes really tricky to do, because the more characters there are, the more subplots there are, and more storylines to follow, and storylines that can interconnect, and more, you know, twists and turns that can happen. So that's difficult to do because it's hard to kind of remember who's doing what, who's where. And in this case, we have to deal with, I'm guessing, the detective and the scientist, and then probably like the students themselves, and then maybe some of their parents, because we've been introduced to Onjo's father, and Chonsung's mother and father. But I think maybe maybe the mother might play a bigger role. We'll see. But, and then of course the bullies, and then within the school itself, there's so many subsects of people. So it's going to be really cool to see. And with respect to who the quote-unquote main characters might be, it's still kind of unclear because the outbreak has just begun, so we don't know who's going to survive, who will survive. But I'm guessing, based on the amount of screen time that Onjo's character was given, Onjo, Chong-sun, and then probably Numra, the class president, and then the guy who likes her, they called him Bear Sue, or Ben Sue, which stands for Bear Sue because he doesn't like to put on his socks. I think his name was Soo-hyuk. So I think these four might be the main quote unquote main characters, but it is obviously an ensemble cast. So it'll be really cool to see moving forward in episode 2 where things go, because the way episode 1 ends off is just, it just began, right? And Onjo, she's just laying on the ground waiting for what? Is she waiting to be rescued when the zombie's about to attack her? But anyways, that's probably just a shock value thing, right? Like a shock factor. Like you don't expect something crazy like that to happen to you. But overall, I was very impressed with the way the story was written and the way things progressed, because it did not waste time. It gave enough breathing room to introduce characters, talk about, you know, the dynamics between them, who likes who hates who are we rooting for, who are we not rooting for, and then it just dives right into the virus. And the fact that this is a school setting obviously makes it way more unique than something like The Walking Dead or Train to Busan, because while those two things, for example, were great, they weren't necessarily the most unique, so to speak. But this looks a little unique, just simply on the basis that these are teenagers that have to fend for themselves, right? But thank you so much for joining me today, and I'm so excited to dive into episode 2 very soon, because, like I said, this show has been nothing but surprisingly great. And again, if you don't know what I'm talking about, go watch the episode. And if you don't even know what the heck the show is, go watch my trailer reaction video, which the link for which will be in the description. But for now, thank you so much, and do not forget to like, share, and subscribe. Thank you. Peace.